This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Draft zone.
Who else could it be? Put me. You're me. Louie T, welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where we break down all 32 teams in the National Football League and their respective drafts by using our baseball grading scale: single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts in the Draft Wrap-Up Series, as we cannot tell how these players will pan out at the next level. Don't want to discount these players. Do not want to count them out before they get their chance in the National Football League. We get a score for each and every single pick by X said team. After we get a total for each and every single pick, we add them up together, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, and that is how we come to our conclusion and our final score, and move on then to the next team in the process, which you, the viewers, pick. This is the up format. You pick. You, the viewers, are in total control of who is next up on the program. Simply be the first, the absolute first, no equivocations. Be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of the video once it is uploaded, stating simply next and the team you'd like to see next. It's a really simple process, and because of that, the next team up in the 2015 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series is none other than the Philadelphia Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly. And it seems like time has flown by since Chip Kelly has taken over this Eagles franchise and really put his stamp and imprint on this team 2 years ago, getting rid of Deshaun Jackson. Last year, trading away, or this offseason, trading away Shady McCoy and allowing receiver Jeremy Maclin to walk. And so a lot of money there, a lot of money that he commanded on the free agent market, and can't blame Chip Kelly for not having him back in Philadelphia for an $11 million price tag. That's a lot of money to pay a guy that just had his first 1,000-yard season of his career. So you can understand him not having Jeremy Maclin back, but changes in the front office, Chip Kelly getting rid of some of the guys up there and taking over full control there. So a lot has been given to Chip Kelly in the form of power. But as we all know, to whom much is given, much is expected, and we'll see what Chip Kelly does. I seem to feel like Chip Kelly does not respect the draft for what it is and what it can bring to a football team. He seems to like to do his damage out in free agency. He likes to go and acquire the players that he feels like he can bring in and get the job done. And so, to me, I don't think there's a lot of stock being put into the draft since Chip Kelly has taken over. He's traded away picks. He's went out and got guys that he feels like can run his system, whether it be Oregon players or ex-Oregon players or players from afar that he admires and he wants on this football team. Either way, Chip Kelly is doing it his way, and this is another example of him going about the draft and getting out the players that he feels like can help the Eagles, and then moving on. Not having 10, 11 player drafts, hell, not even 8, 9 player drafts. He's going in 6-player draft, getting his guys and getting out. And so because of that, this is going to be a rather quick breakdown. Let's jump into the 2015 NFL Draft of the Philadelphia Eagles. We start in the first round, pick number 20, wide receiver out of USC, Nelson Agholor. Here is a kid that is extremely talented, multifaceted. Let's talk about his pros and why he's going to come in and fit right in to this Eagles offense. Long, 6 foot, 198 pound, wiry framed receiver. This is a guy, a lot of production at USC. Remember, he's a guy that has taken over the mantle. Last year, they saw another big time receiver come off of that team into the NFL in the second round. And so he had to take over as the guy at USC, and he filled that void very well. Outstanding route runner. To me, is one of his biggest assets as he moves on to the NFL level. This guy is extremely adept at running routes, getting separation. He's already an extremely gifted athlete, and we'll get to that a little bit later on, but yet he still possesses the ability to run routes very crisp and smoothly, to get in and out of his breaks, separate from defenders, stems at the top of the route and gets it done, and finds a way to create separation just by running extremely good routes. Versatility. He can play out wide, he can play in the slot. I think that's something else that the Eagles treasure here in Nelson Agholor. He's a guy that can play in the slot, win from the slot position. USC moved this guy all around the field. He was out wide, he was in the slot, he was in the backfield. They would move him around all over the place, and he would create and invent ways to get it done, especially on third downs. They were looking for Nelson Agholor as a playmaker, and he would deliver time and time again. Great hands. He's a guy, you throw it in his general vicinity a lot of times, most times than not, he's going to come down with the football. Didn't see a lot of drops. Most of the times when he wasn't able to come down with the football, it was a great play by the defender, knocking the football away from him. Didn't see flat out drops on the part of Nelson Agholor. Even when he was running, football wasn't going to be catchable inbounds. He'd still catch it out of bounds. He's got really good hands. He's a yakster, and I talk about this all the time about receivers. If you're going to step into the National Football League and have an immediate impact, especially at the wide receiver position, if you're a first-round pick, you show me a first-round receiver, I'll show you a guy that's a yakster that can catch the football and then get some yards after the catch. And of course, Nelson Agholor is a guy that is just as dangerous without the football. Talked about the route running ability, just as dangerous without the football as he is with the football. And so when he catches the football, he gets separation, which is the key to everything, getting him wide open. Then once he catches the football, he's a huge task to try to get down onto the ground. He's a guy that can accelerate, get from 0 to 60 real quick. And so he's a guy that, with the football in his hands, can make things happen. And we'll talk about how that translates in other areas a little bit later on. Explosive athlete, I've kind of touched on that already. A 4.44 40 guy, so he's a Moses Malone 40 guy, and he can get it done. Again, him being an explosive athlete translates in numerous ways. Let's talk about that. Special teams value. To me, this is something else the Eagles really value with Nelson Agholor, is his ability to come in, not only be a receiver, out wide, in the slot, backfield, wherever you want to put this guy on the field offensively, but what he brings to you from a special teams standpoint. I thought the Eagles were actually pretty good last year returning kickoffs, but they lacked that oomph in the punt return department when Darren Sproles wasn't on the field. When Darren Sproles was back there, you never knew what was going to happen. Was he going to bust one or not? He's a dangerous guy. But now you get another guy in Nelson Agholor that can take those duties away from Darren Sproles. If Darren Sproles decides to turn an ankle and miss 2 weeks, you're not hurting in the punt return game. You've got a guy in Nelson Agholor that can fill those duties and fill them well. He was dynamic at USC returning punts against Arizona State and Washington State. Saw both of those. Electric speed, got the football, got up the field, made guys miss, got into the end zone. So he's dynamic on not only kickoff returns, but also as a punt returner. So he's a multifaceted athlete that can help you in a number of ways, and is going to come in and be a big-time contributor year one for this Philadelphia Eagles football team. And last but not least, he's a willing and capable blocker. Look, he's not going to blow you away with the way he blocks as a wide receiver, but I'll tell you what, he'll get in the way, he'll do his job, he'll do it to the best of his abilities, and he's willing to get his hands dirty. And again, that's always the start of doing something like being a capable blocker or a tackler as a cornerback, is being willing, having the mental capacity to say, hey, I want to participate and I want to do my job to the best of my abilities. Nelson Agholor is one of those guys. You go to his cons. Not much of a jump baller. He's not one of these guys you throw the football up to and have them climb the ladder and go down and snatch the football. But you've got bigger receivers for that. You've got guys that you feel like you can throw the football up to, have them go make a play on it. And so that's not going to be what his responsibility is in this offense. He's going to be the chess piece that Chip Kelly moves around, and a guy you get the football into his hands quickly on bubble screens and and hitches and things of that nature, jet sweeps and crossing patterns and deep 9 routes down the field. He's a guy that's going to be the explosive playmaker of this offense, not necessarily throwing jump balls to him and asking him to climb the ladder, but that's not really a part of his game. He could stand to gain a few pounds as well. I think really where you see that be impactful is in the run game when he's trying to block. Sometimes he's just overmatched. Guys are bigger than him, hard for him to hold his ground. Saw a couple of holding penalties on tape where he's trying to block. Guys are a little bit physical with him. He can't stand up at the point of attack. They toss him out of the way. He doesn't let him go. Gets a holding penalty. So that's something that I think he could stand to do at the next level. Put on a couple of pounds. And that will also translate and help him as a receiver getting off the line of scrimmage in case cornerbacks want to be a little bit physical with him. He'll be able to stand up to that as well if he puts on a few more pounds. At 198, he's not that far off of where he probably should be at around 205, 210 maybe. That would be nice. And maybe that's wishful thinking. This is a long, wiry guy. Don't want him to lose any of that explosiveness and speed by trying to put on weight. If he's a 200-pound receiver, then he's a 200-pound receiver. But I tell you what, this guy is explosive, and he's coming in to replace Jeremy Maclin. And I actually think he's more explosive than Jeremy Maclin. Maclin made some huge plays for you last year. He's going to have some big shoes to fill. In the first round, wide receiver out of USC, Nelson Aguilar, for me, is a huge, big-time, deep shot to left field. This is a home run for the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round as they get a receiver to come in and look to replace a lot of production that you're going to be missing from the lineup in a guy like Jeremy Maclin. This kid is going to come in, not only help you as a receiver, but help you on special teams as well. Wouldn't surprise me in year one if he's got at least one return to the crib at some point, whether it's kickoff or on punt returns. This guy is dynamic, and he's going to help the Eagles stay at the top of the league as one of the most explosive offenses in the National Football League. You move on to the second round, pick 47, cornerback out of Utah, Eric Rowe. Eagles trade up to get him 5 spots with the Dolphins, give away 2 5th-round selections in the process, and get a 6th-round pick in return. So again, this is what I'm talking about. Chip Kelly devaluing the draft. 5th-round picks are big because they help build your roster, but Chip Kelly feels really comfortable with where the Eagles are from a roster standpoint. He feels like I'm going to pick out a few guys that can help. I'll get a couple of guys at the back end of the draft and see if they can help as well. Take out a few flyers on some 6th-round picks. If they don't make the team, so be it. We've got guys, we'll be fine. But at the top of the draft, he's got his guys that he's got his eye on and wants to go and get them, and Eric Rowe is definitely one of those players. Let's talk about his pros. Big, physical, 6'1", 205-pound corner out of Utah. Thing I like about Eric Rowe is that in the Pac-12, you're going up against some big-time targets, one of those being Jalen Strong. And so you go up against guys that can get the job done that you'll see playing at the next level in the National Football League. And so he was able to compete, get some things done against some of these bigger body receivers. And remember, this is a guy that is a big-time safety before last year, before the 2014 season, was a safety 2-3 years prior. And then all of a sudden, Utah says, hey, we'd like to see you at corner. Move him over to corner, and the transition is seamless. So you're talking about a guy with some versatility. That's the next pro. Here's a guy that is extremely versatile because of his time at safety. Maybe the Eagles are looking at him as a safety because the Eagles came into this offseason with cornerback being one of the most pressing, and just not really just corner. Literally the entire secondary was an issue for this Eagles football team. If you want to point to one of the weak spots and one of the reasons why this Eagles team was not able to make it to the postseason last year, look no further than the secondary, which was a huge source of a problem for this Eagles football team. They addressed that in the offseason. They went out and got Walter Thurman III. They went out and got a cornerback from Seattle, a guy that I like a lot, in Byron Maxwell. And then you go into the draft and you start stockpiling guys. Keep in mind, last year you drafted Jalen Watkins out of Florida, and a lot of people like him and feel like he's going to be a really good player down the road. You still have Brandon Boykin. So there are football players on this team, and then you go in and you load up in the draft. So there's not going to be space for all of these guys on the roster, but Eric Rowe is definitely going to be on the team. Will he be a cornerback or a safety? That I can't answer right now. We'll see what the Eagles decide to do with him. Great athlete though. For a guy that played safety and played corner last year, a 4.45 40 for a guy that size is tremendous, and I think that's part of the versatility, part of the attraction that is Eric Rowe. A lot of people love this guy's skill set, and having that kind of speed with that kind of size and that movement that he brings is something that intrigued a lot of teams, including Chip Kelly and the Philadelphia Eagles. Attacks the football when it is in the air. I think that's something else that he does really well. For a guy that used to play safety, you would expect his ball skills to not be up to par with some of the upper echelon corners in this draft. All contraire, my friend. He's a guy that is around the football, attacks it like a wide receiver when it's in the air. And so that's something that you can appreciate as a fan, seeing a guy go after the football like it's meant for him when it is in the air. Able to defeat blocks and be in tackling position is another pro for me now. I don't quite like the way he goes about getting guys on the ground, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but the fact that he's able to get by a blocker, shed him, get out of the way, defeat the block, and be in a position to make a tackle makes all the difference in the world. Now, him making the tackle doesn't always go as planned, but again, just being in the way and being a hindrance and an obstacle to getting up the field for a ball carrier a lot of times is enough to make that ball carrier change directions or stall or try to juke you, which allows other teammates to come from afar and get in on the play. So sometimes just your presence, being around the football, is enough to stop a play from going for big yardage. And he's a guy that can defeat blocks and get. And this is kind of what being an ex-safety, he's got a safety's mentality, but he's in the cornerback body and he's at the cornerback position. So I think you're looking at this package as a whole and saying to yourself, this is a good football player. And so he has special teams value as well. So not only is he a guy that can play safety, not only is he a guy that's probably going to play corner for you, but he can also help you on special teams. Saw that on tape as well. So you're getting a lot out of this guy. And I think, again, his size and that versatility is something that really intrigued the Philadelphia Eagles. You go to his cons. He's too stationary as a cornerback. And what I mean by that is, as a corner, you don't really want your feet to stop moving unless you're planting to drive on the football. If you're a cornerback, that's why they teach you how to backpedal, because they want you in a backpedal. They want you to have your feet moving because it's easier to turn and run when your feet are already moving, when you've already got some momentum. It's harder to start running after you're basically at a standstill. The guy coming at you as a receiver, he's running full speed already. So if your feet aren't moving, guess what? You're not going to be able to turn and all of a sudden run with this guy who's coming at you full speed. He's already eating up your cushion. You've got to start the engine. His is already running at, 5.6 RPMs. You're not catching up. So the thing about him is, he's a guy, and let's talk about this next con as well and kind of lump these two in together because it makes a lot of sense that way. His eye discipline. He's a guy that's nosy. He wants to, especially when in zone coverage, he wants to look at the quarterback, see what the quarterback's thinking. He wants to jump the route. He wants to be nosy, and he wants to get a freebie. So what he's doing is he's playing 7-8 yards off the ball. He's eyeballing the quarterback. Receiver sees that, and it may be an option route. Receiver may have an option to come back to the football, break inside, or just send it right up the field. And so if I see that as a receiver, I see you flat-footed and you're not moving, I'm running right by you. And that happened to him several times on tape where he's being nosy, looking in the backfield because he's really hoping that the receiver is running a shorter route that allows him to break on the football. And he's just sitting on the route. He's essentially sitting on the route, not moving. He's stationary, which allows a moving target to run right by him. Happened several times on tape. I need him to move, not be as nosy in the backfield, and pay attention to your problem and your assignment in front of you, which is the wide receiver. Don't allow yourself to get into trouble by trying to be nosy and jump routes. Just do your job. Sometimes there can be a lot said for a guy that can just do his job. They call it hero ball. You don't need to be a hero all the time. Sometimes just doing your job is plenty. Gives up inside position too easily. For a guy his size, I want to see him get in the face of a receiver, jam him up, put his hands on him, and not allow inside position to run slants and in-breaking routes too easy. He's a guy that I feel like you can get inside on him. His one interception that I saw on tape that he took to the crib was beautiful, and it was because he didn't allow the receiver a free release inside of him. He gave him a little bit of a chuck, was able to get a little bit of inside position, tip the football to himself, pick it off, take it to the crib. I want to see him be more aggressive when receivers are trying to get inside of him. Sometimes I feel like they're getting free passes inside, and you can't allow it to happen as a cornerback. That size, you're 205, you're 6'1", lay hands on these guys, make it tough for them to win on a 5-yard slant up the field. Make it hard for them to win trying to run a dragger across the field. Make it tough on these receivers to get off the line of scrimmage. Use your size to your ability. Could be a better form tackler, and I talked about him defeating blocks and getting in position to make plays as a tackler, but he's not the best form tackler. As an ex-safety, I expected more out of him in the tackling department, and I wasn't too enthused with what I saw from him. He gets guys on the ground sometimes, other times I get half-hearted efforts out of him as a tackler. I'd love to see him tackle better. Just flat out tackle better moving forward, because a lot of these guys are exceptional athletes at the next level. You miss a tackle, you whiff on a tackle, you give me a half-hearted effort, guys are going to pick up another 10, 15, maybe even 30, 40 yards on plays where you have a chance to get a guy, especially when you're out on an island. This isn't college football where you might not see an explosive, dynamic receiver, but once every 3-4 weeks. Every week you're seeing a guy that can take it to the crib on moment's notice. And so they might throw a hitch, because you like to play 7 yards off. They'll throw a hitch out there, and if you come with one of these bum efforts, get a guy on the ground, they'll make you miss. Next thing you know, he's running up the sidelines for a touchdown. So that's something I'd like to see him clean up. As a tackler, be a better form tackler, get guys on the ground. But with all that being said, this is a really good football player with tremendous upside. And in this league now, with the receivers growing at an enormous rate, you gotta have guys this size that can play with these bigger receivers, and I think Eric Rowe is one of those type of guys. In the second round, pick 47, cornerback out of Utah, Eric Rowe for me is a triple in the corner. This is a guy that can come in and help you, and I'm interested to see how the Eagles deploy some of these cornerbacks. They went from a team that was deficient in the secondary to having an abundance of riches. Want to see how they bring some of these guys along, including a corner like Eric Rowe. You go to the third round, pick number 84, linebacker out of Texas, Jordan Hicks. His pro, athletic with some movement skills. This is a 4'6'8", 40 type linebacker with sideline to sideline movement skills. And to me, when he's clean, and this is his next pro, he can get to the football. And really, that's not saying much, because that's just about any linebacker in the National Football League. When they're clean, they're dynamic. But to me, what separates the exceptional linebackers inside, and this is an inside linebacker we're talking about, what separates the exceptional linebackers from the average Joes of the world in the National Football League at the inside linebacker positions is essentially guys that can make plays when they're blocked. Guys that can shed blockers and defenders and get to the football. He's not one of those guys, we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but when he's clean, he's a very dynamic football player. Will compete and take on blocks. This is not a big linebacker. This is a 6'1", 236-pound linebacker. So for him to step in the gap and take on a 307-pound guard or center, that's asking a lot for a guy his size, but he is willing to take on these guys head on and meet them in a gap and not give up ground sometimes. Not all the time, we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but to me, that's half the battle, is being, in my mind, you've got to be somewhat crazy, because being that undersized, going up against guys that have 70 pounds on you a lot of times, and not caring, throwing your body out there and just giving it all you got, that takes a lot. It takes a lot of moxie, takes a lot of heart, takes a little bit of crazy too, because I've seen many linebacker in my day move out of the way. See a guy coming his way with evil intentions, coming downhill, big, physical, and nasty, They want no part of them. They glide to the side, open up a glaring hole up the middle of the field. Running back follows that guard, and boom, you got yourself a 17-yard gain. Jordan Hicks isn't going to do that. He's going to stand up to that block, whether he gets blown out of that gap or he stands up and is physical at the point of attack. He's going to give it all he has, and I can appreciate a guy that's willing to compete and take on blockers despite being undersized. Can shoot the gap as a blitzer. He's a guy that made a couple of plays that I watched on tape, and I think this is something that he did while at Texas, is getting into the backfield when asked to blitz, being a dynamic blitzer, getting into the backfield. There was one play where he essentially took the handoff from the quarterback. He didn't get the football out there, but tell you what, he was in the backfield like he was a running back. Running back didn't have a chance. Jordan Hicks was in his face as soon as he got the football, about a 4-yard loss on the play. So, I mean, he can really shoot the gap as a blitzer and be effective when asked to blitz up those gaps toward the middle of the field. Solid in coverage. There was a play, and I don't recall the team that they were playing against. Might have been Kansas, but an exceptional play for a linebacker to be out in space, to have a guy, tight end, going outside toward the boundary, toward the sidelines, to locate him because he's running. He sees the quarterback. He takes his eyes off the quarterback to locate the tight end, finds the tight end, and as he's turning back around, quarterback delivering the football. As he turns around, football's behind him this way. He's running that way. He turns, sees the football, picks it off like this. That's a hell of an athletic play, okay? And not many guys are going to be able to do that. That takes a lot of hand-eye coordination, takes a lot of athleticism. He was able to pull it off and made it look very effortless. So he's a very fluid athlete, and in space can be a solid cover linebacker. So that's another thing that I think the Eagles were intrigued by. And again, Michael Kendrick's going to be a free agent. This could be a guy that they could be grooming to take that spot here. And you know, Chip isn't big on paying guys. We've seen that in these last couple of off seasons. He'll let a guy walk if he thinks he's overvalued himself. And so Jordan Hicks, to me, could be a solid replacement for a guy like Michael Kendrick down the road. You go to his cons. Undersized at 6'1", 236. I basically already spoke to that. He's a guy that will give you everything he's got, but he's just undersized. He's overmatched often. And let's talk about the next con as well. Doesn't disengage well enough for me. This is a guy that, like I said, he'll compete. He'll come in. He'll try to stand up to these guards and these centers coming at him at the second level, but a lot of times when they get their hands on him, they're able to dump truck Jordan Hicks, move him out of the way 5, 6, even 7 yards at a time, out of the way, out of the play. And so to me, he does not disengage, does not stack and shed well enough for me at the linebacker position. And again, when you get linebackers getting moved out of the way in the middle of your defense, in the teeth of your defense, you're asking for trouble on a consistent basis. Out of position too often. That's another problem for me. Even when he's not blocked, it's bad enough you're getting blown up in a run game because you're undersized. I need you to be where you're supposed to be when you're not getting blocked. And there's times where he'll overrun a play by a gap, open up a hole, open up a cutback lane, and next thing you know, he's out of position and he can't get back in it because now he's been engulfed by all the trash that's around him, can't get back to the football, and now instead of him being where he's supposed to be and stopping the play for a minimal gain, now all of a sudden, back's coming out of the backside, and next thing you know, it's a 42-yard gain because he didn't keep his gap integrity. And so that to me is something that is also an issue that he needs to clean up at the next level. And the biggest problem with him is injury concerns. Before last year, he was a guy that just could not stay on the field. In 2012, hip injury, so he had to have surgery there. 2013, you don't play with hips. Hips are huge deals at the next level. And of course, 2013 blows out his Achilles. So we're talking about a guy with huge injury concerns, missed 16 games over the last 2 seasons. If he can stay healthy, they could have a football player on their hands, but that is a big if with Jordan Hicks. In the 3rd round, 84th overall selection, linebacker out of Texas. Jordan Hicks for me is a solid double. Saw a lot of good things, saw some things I didn't like. He could probably put on some weight and be a more physical presence in the middle of this defense. Needs to stay healthy in order to do that though. We'll see what happens with Jordan Hicks. I think this is a guy they're going to groom to take over the reins if Michael Kendricks isn't back in Philadelphia after next season. You go all the way to the 6th round now, so we skip from the 3rd all the way to the 6th. the various trades that Chip Kelly participated in the offseason, whether it's the Rams, whether it's the Dolphins. No 5th round pick, no 4th round pick. You go to the 6th round again. Talk about Chip Kelly kind of devaluing the draft because it feels like he has the players that he wants. Maybe, top of the draft, there's some guys that he's targeting. You saw them go out and go get Nelson Aguilar. You saw them trade up to get Eric Rowe. Those were guys that I think he targeted. Then after that, it's kind of like, hey, we're in the draft. We got selections. Let's just pick somebody and keep it moving. And so we start in the 6th round, 191st overall selection. Cornerback out of Kansas, Ja'Cory Shepherd. Let's talk about his pros. Good feet. As a cornerback, you want guys that have agility and quick feet and have the right mechanics as a cornerback. You can get lost in the sauce real quick as a cornerback just by not having good feet, not having good technique. He has good feet, good technique. And this is an ex-wide receiver. So this is a guy that is still kind of raw at this position, made the transition from a wide receiver coming into Kansas and playing a full year at wide receiver to making the transition to a cornerback. And so he's a guy that has some things that he's got to work on, but there's a lot to like here with Ja'Cory Shepherd. Looks for the football. That's another thing that I like. Anytime you look for the football as a cornerback, you've got my attention and you've got my respect, because the National Football League, one of the biggest sins that can be committed by a cornerback is not looking for the football. Face guarding, and a lot of times guys panic when the football's in the air. We'll talk about that in a second. And when they panic, when the football's in the air, you get a PI. And so looking for the football really eliminates a lot of those mistakes made by cornerbacks. If you could just find the football located, you can really resolve a lot of the issues that the cornerbacks face in the National Football League. And Ja'Cory Shepherd looks for the football. And so you couple these two together and you get some dynamic plays. You look for the football first, and then you attack it when it is in the air. Ja'Cory Shepherd does that extremely well. And I think that's where that ex-wide receiver nature takes over, where he attacks the football like a receiver. It's mine, it's in the air, I got dibs on it, I can go get it. And he attacks the football like a guy that is still playing the wide receiver position. And to me, that is intriguing in itself. When you got a guy that sees the football in the air and feels like it's mine and he's going up to go and get it. Great awareness. Many times that I watched him on tape, and all the tapes that I had the pleasure of watching on Ja'Cory Shepherd, where he didn't know what was going on and he didn't know where the football was. And so I love the fact that he's aware. He's aware of his surroundings. He's aware of where the player is that he's guarding in proximity to where the football is. Wasn't one of these guys that was clueless. And this is what happens when you have good awareness. He does not panic when he's beat. Okay? There are several issues with Ja'Cory Shepherd, and we'll talk about them when we get to his cons. One of them is lack of speed. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And so, because of the lack of top-end speed, he will get beat sometimes. But just because he's beat sometimes doesn't mean he's panicking, doesn't mean the arms are flailing in the air, he's face guarding, and he's grabbing at the arm before the ball comes. None of that takes place. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. He lets the quarterback make a mistake. Now, I'm tell you what, at the next level, he may not be as fortunate, but in college, a number of times that I watched, he was beaten, balls were deflated, they were underthrown, and he was able to get back into play, did not panic, and was able to either deflect the football or go and pick it off or make a play on it. And so that, to me, is a quality that not enough corners in the National Football League have, is the ability to not panic when beat. He's a willing tackler, and again, when you're an ex-wide receiver, you think that guys they might lack that physicality you're looking for as a corner. Not Ja'Cory Shepherd. He's a guy that's willing to stick his nose in there and get guys on the ground. It's not always the most conventional way, but guys usually find the ground when he's around. You go to his cons. He's not the most sound tackler in the world, and I just gave him credit for being a willing tackler. Remember, willing and able are two different things. He's a willing tackler. That means he's willing to get his hands dirty. Is he the best tackler? No, not quite. And I talked about that already by saying it's not the most conventional way. I've seen him grab guys around the head and the shoulders. Not a form tackling guy, And some of that kind of speaks to the fact that he's an ex-receiver. Probably wasn't in a lot of corner tackling drills in high school and even in college to a certain degree. He was mostly catching footballs all of his upbringing and youth. So a lot of the tackling, fundamentals that you normally get as a kid, he didn't get. So you can see that on tape. Not the cleanest tackling form. Not gonna put on some textbook tape for this guy as far as him being a tackler is concerned. He's not gonna be on anybody's textbook tape showing how to tackle. But again, normally he gets guys on the ground. Long distance speed is an issue, and to me this is the biggest problem with Jacory Shepherd because again, there's a lot to like here. The tape is pretty clean. The only issue I have with him, he ran a 4.6 and some change 40. You're talking about damn near 4.7. You're talking about safety speed, folks. You're talking about linebacker speed. That's not good enough for a corner, especially a guy that was an ex-receiver. You expect him to be a little bit faster than that. But in his defense, on the tape, you didn't see him getting blown by very often. Guys had steps on him, and like I said, he was the beneficiary of some underthrows, some deflated footballs coming his way. He was able to make a play on it, but really at the next level, guys are going to air it out. They're going to allow receivers to run under the football. If he gets beat like he did at Kansas, he's going to have some problems because guys are going to run by him with speed, and the quarterbacks are going to be able to lay it out there for them to go run under the football and not underthrow the ball or allow him back into the play. But look, I think there is some intriguing upside here. This kid is still raw. There's still a lot of things that he doesn't know how to do and some things that he's going to get better at. I like Jacory Shepherd a lot. I like the tape. I like his ability to attack the football like he's still playing the wide receiver position. So much so that in the 6th round, 191st overall selection, cornerback out of Kansas, Jacory Shepherd for me is a triple. I like this kid. I like his potential. I even like him so much that I think he's going to compete to try to make this roster. There's no guarantees. I've already talked about how deep the Eagles are at the cornerback position now that they've drafted a couple of young corners and they went out in free agency and added 2 more corners to their already 2 that they felt good about on the roster. So I feel like Jacory Shepherd is going to have to work extremely hard in all the camps and improve himself, but I think this is a guy that could easily make this roster. You go to the 6th round, another 6th round selection, 196th overall selection, cornerback out of Kansas State, Randall Evans. His pros, long 6 foot, 195-pound corner. He makes plays on the football. That's his next pro. He's a guy that will go up, challenge a receiver, and make a play on the ball. You watch the Baylor tape, and to me that was probably one of his cleanest tapes. He made a play on a ball that was thrown to the inside by their quarterback. And it was a beautiful play. It's in the end zone, okay? The receiver's running across the field. He's trailing him on the play, and the quarterback tries to squeeze it in there. Bryce Petty tries to throw across his body as he's rolling out. And it's not a bad throw, it's not the best throw in the world, but it still took a hell of an effort to dive, corral the football. Anytime you leave your feet and dive as a defender and come up with the football, it's an outstanding play, and that's exactly what that was in the end zone to take points off the scoreboard for Baylor early in that football game. He had another play down the field. He's running with one of their receivers in a trail position. Guys got to step on him. He did get away with a little tug and pull. He tugged the uni, grabbed it, and helped propel him toward the football, but still made a hell of a play to get a hand on the football, so he located the football. So that's big time for me. When you're 40 yards down the field, you can locate the football, make a play on it, especially when you're trailing on the play. That's big time. He was able to do that. Gets guys on the ground. Not always the prettiest when he's going to tackle, but he's a shoestring tackler. He's a guy that will shoot the cuffs and get guys on the ground. Remember the first 2 plays I watched from him as a tackler, he whiffed twice. I said, this guy can't tackle. Didn't see him miss another tackle in all the tapes that I watched. So he gets guys on the ground, and it's normally by their legs. I don't give a damn how you do it. Just get him on the ground. He does a good job of doing it. Blitzer off the slot. He's a guy that primarily plays in the slot, and that's what he did at Kansas State. Had a little bit of versatility to him. Go ahead and lump that in as that is his last pro. Has some versatility, lined up over the slot many times at Kansas State, but also lined up at the safety position. So again, Eagles taking guys with versatility that could potentially kick the safety. And so don't know if he's one of those guys that's a candidate to do that or not, but he did line up at the safety position on a number of snaps at Kansas State, and he did blitz from the slot position on a couple of times, and he came after UCLA quarterback Brett Hundley, and we know he is one of the most athletic quarterbacks that came into the 2015 NFL draft. And so he was able to chase him from behind, off the slot, force him into an errant throw. There was another play where he comes off the corner and blitzing and is able to deflect a pass. So he's a guy that can get to the quarterback blitzing off the slot, does a really good job of doing that. You go to his cons, plays a lot of off coverage. And I think the reason he plays a lot of off coverage is because of the next con. Flawed footwork. This is a guy that I saw turned around on a number of routes that were breaking back towards the football. Again, if you got good footwork, you don't waste a lot of motion, there's no need to turn your back to the quarterback nor the receiver. If he comes and you open up your hips and you open them up this way, there's no reason for you to turn this way or even turn this way, and the receiver is going back that way to the football. So he was a guy that on some routes breaking back toward the sidelines would turn his back completely to the quarterback and the wide receiver and get beat for a completion right in front of him. And so that's just all in technique and footwork. He's raw. This is a guy that was a walk-on at Kansas State, and he went from a walk-on to a scholarship athlete to Big 12, all first team. So you're talking about a guy that has made a tremendous leap from a walk-on to a scholarship athlete to one of the better cornerbacks in all of the Big 12. So this is a guy that has persevered, gotten through a lot, and has shown the ability to rise above all of the naysayers. He's a guy that is very raw, and I just spoke to that. Walk on, had to overcome adversity, become a scholarship athlete, and now is one of their better football players. And so that was big time for him at Kansas State, but it's also a detriment because at this next level, as a 6th round pick, you don't have time to really learn on the fly. You've got to come in and show the coaches what you can do right away. If you're not good enough, you're not going to make the football team, and you may not get another chance if you don't put good tape on for other teams around the league if you do not make this Eagles roster. So there are some question marks there with a guy like Randall Evans in the 6th round, 196th overall selection out of Kansas State. To me, he's a double. There are some good qualities here, some things that I really like, but to me, the cons, they kind of offset some of the pros, and it's going to make him very hard for him to make this roster if he's just a corner. If they're looking at him as a safety, he's got an outside shot. If he's an extremely dependable guy on special teams, he's got an outside shot. But if he does not have the versatility that I believe he has, which is to play corner and safety, and he is not a dominant defender on special teams, he will not make this roster for the Philadelphia Eagles. They are too deep in that secondary now with all the moves they've made in this offseason. You go to the 7th round, 6th and final selection in this draft, 237th pick overall, defensive end out of Boston College, Brian Mahalik. Here's a guy, you know, Chip Kelly loves him, big and long along the defensive line. 6'9", 295-pound 5 technique. So this is right up Chip Kelly's alley. We know he drafted a big kid out of Oregon just a year or two ago. There's another kid, Brandon Bear, that's on this roster out of Oregon. That's another big 6'6" kid. So we know Chip Kelly loves them big. And so he's just going to add another one to the mix and see if this guy stands out amongst the rest. He can collapse the pocket. He's a big physical kid that can collapse the pocket if he uses leverage correctly. There was one play against NC State, takes his one hand, and I love when guys use the long arm of the law. It's one is always better than two as a defensive lineman. You get 2 hands on a guy. If you're extremely strong, great. But one hand normally gets the job done every single time if you're looking to bull rush somebody. There was a play against NC State, long arm of the law, right into the chest, takes the guy up, basically walks him into the lap of the quarterback, gets to the quarterback, gets him down for an 8-yard loss and a sack. So he can do that. Don't see it enough though, but he can't collapse the pocket. Start at the point of attack. To me, this is his biggest attribute. You're not gonna move this guy. Not one time did I see this guy blown off the ball by one defender. A couple of times he was double teamed, they moved him off the spot, but it takes a double team. You'll take that. If a guy can stand up to a double team, that's even better. But we're talking about a 5 technique. We're not talking about a nose tackle. So if he's getting blown up by 2 defenders, somebody's got to fill that gap and help him out. But when it's one-on-one, I didn't see this guy moved off the spot not one single time. Smart football player. That same NC State game that I'm referencing, there's a screen coming to his side. He smells screen, recognizes what's going on, comes off of his blocker, and is able to take a step back, pick the football up. First career, only career interception, but it was a hell of a play by a guy that saw what was happening and made a play. So that's big time, that's smart football. Another attribute that Brian Mahalik brings to the table. We go to his cons. He's unathletic. He's not a sideline guy, not going to play down the line, not going to do anything to impact the game from an athletic standpoint. Just not his game at all whatsoever. Doesn't get any pressure on the quarterback. 7 career sacks in 4 years. So don't look for him to get pressure on the quarterback. Hell, the big Washington defensive tackle, Danny Shelton, had 9.5 sacks this year. And we're talking about a 350-pound guy. So there's no athleticism here. There's no pressure on the quarterback whatsoever from Brian Mahalik. Doesn't get his hands up enough. Look, damn it, man, you're 6'9". Get your damn hands up. No, stop that. Put your hands down. No, don't put your hands down. Put them up. You're not getting to the quarterback, obviously by 7 sacks. Get your damn hands up. Impact the game, man. I don't see it. I don't see it. So that frustrates me. Do something to impact the game. He doesn't. He's not a difference maker. That's my last. When you put all that together, he's not a difference maker. His cons far outweigh his pros. I don't see this guy making a roster. Like I said, Chip Kelly would much rather have one of his Oregon guys man up the 5 technique along that defensive line. He's got 2 of them on the roster right now as we speak. I don't think this kid is going to make the roster, but I said the same thing about the Wisconsin nose tackle last year that you drafted in the 7th round, and guess who made the damn roster? So what do I know, right? We'll see if Brian Mahalik can do the same thing that the big kid out of Wisconsin did last year for the Philadelphia Eagles by making the roster as a late round selection. To me, in the 7th round, 231st or 37th overall selection, defensive end out of Boston College, Brian Mahalik is a single. You saw where this was going. I didn't really like what I saw on tape. I saw some good qualities, and again, his pros aren't enough to cancel out the cons. The cons are just engulfing the pros. There's not enough here. Doesn't impact the game enough. I watched another tape. He did nothing. I didn't even know he was on the field. And that can't happen. If you're an impactful player, there's got to be something you can do to impact the game. Brian Mahalik doesn't do it enough for me. And so that's the Eagles draft. Let's tally up these picks and get in a final score for these Eagles. You start in the 1st round, home run there with Nelson Aguilar. You get 2 triples throughout the draft. 2nd round with Eric Gross, and 6th round with Ja'Cory Shepherd. You get a 3rd round double out of Jordan Hicks, as well as a 6th round double with Randall Evans, and you round out the draft with a single from defensive end Brian Mahalik. You add all of that up, you get 15. There's no bonuses for any of these selections lumped together, and so you divide by the number of picks, which is 6, and you come out with a clean 2.5 double. Can't say that I'm overly excited about this draft. And none of these guys, for me, with the exception of Aguilar and Rowe, really moved the needle for me. I'm intrigued by Ja'Cory Shepherd's upside as an ex-receiver turned corner. But other than that, this draft, to me, didn't do a lot for me. Really not a huge Jordan Hicks fan. We'll see if the light bulb comes on for him. I think that right now, Michael Kendricks is a much better football player than Jordan Hicks is. But again, we will see what the coaching staff can do with him and if they can develop him into a good football player. I just don't know if the last 2 guys, Evans and Mahalik, have enough to stick on what is a extremely deep Philadelphia Eagles roster full of Oregon Ducks. And we know how Chip loves his Oregon Duck football players. They're going to have to do a lot to overcome what is already on this Eagles roster. It's a 2.5 double for the Philadelphia Eagles in their 2015 NFL Draft wrap-up. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it. Oh, here in the lab room, come back and join me as I continue to break down anything and everything in the National Football League. You tell me. Who's next? There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more Louie T, be sure to follow me on Twitter at In The Lab Room, or you can like the Facebook page at In The Lab Room. That's In The Lab Room on Facebook and at In The Lab Room on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.
In the